I'm Matt Everett, and welcome to The First Time, where we look at the pivotal first moments that made some of our most influential musicians who they are today. On today's show, we have a man known by many names: Charles Michael Kittredge Thompson IV, Black Francis, Frank Black. But regardless of his title, he's made an indelible mark on music, both as a singer with the Pixies and as a solo artist. Few people have pursued their musical vision with the passion and purpose of Mr. Black Francis, and I'm pleased to have him here. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just won't stop. Doesn't matter how unsuccessful a particular season is. I just keep trying. I keep trying. I love it. I just don't want to go back to a day job.
So let's talk about the first things all the way through your career. The first question we do ask everyone here is, when was the first time you were even aware of music when you were very, very small?
Like most people, I'm sure, before my memory allows me to look back, but I can think back to about age 5 or something, I think. I have certain pivotal musical memories.
Which artists do you remember hearing?
Peter, Paul and Mary, Donovan, what's her name? I got a brand new pair of roller skates. You got a brand new key. That's Melanie, I think.
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah, we had a little Melanie 45 in our house.
Did you connect hearing that music with something that you wanted to create? Did you hear it and think, I would like to, I'd like to make that?
Well, in fact, there was a memory like that, but it doesn't really involve an artist or a song. But there was a guy who I now understand was playing the drums, but I didn't know what they were at that time. But he used to practice across the street from where I lived. And I was too afraid to look into the basement window when he was in there. But when he was not there, I would go over and I would take a look in the window, and I saw this blue sparkly thing, which I now know is a drum set. But I knew that whatever was going on there, I wanted to be involved in that, whatever involved that thing. And then I think soon after that, I got my first sort of introduction to a drum kit by a jazz musician at a cocktail lounge where my mother was a waitress. And she introduced me to him, and he knew I was interested in this, what I then knew was called the drums. And then
Glamorous object.
Yes.
What was the first record you actually owned? Can you remember having that first piece of vinyl that was yours in your hand? What was it?
Well, I think it was inherited, and it was left by the previous tenant of the home where we were at another city, maybe a couple of years after that. And that would have been a copy of, it was probably Donovan's Greatest Hits or something like that, but it was mostly focused on the Mellow Yellow track.
I'm just mad about saffron. They call me Mellow Yellow.
What about your first guitar? Do you remember?
A nylon string classical guitar that belonged to my mother that she purchased, I think for about $100. She used to steal my father's loose change tips. He was worked in the bar business, and so he used to throw his tips up into a closet shelf, and she used to pilfer that for her own little fund. And then she bought herself a guitar, and then she played the guitar a little bit, and then my cousin, who took care of me and my brother for a while when my mother was very ill for a period, he learned how to play guitar for some years on that. And the guitar was out of my life. And then somehow that same guitar in another city came back to me. And then I don't know whatever happened to the guitar. It was lost or something, or we sold it. I don't know what happened to it. But then when I was about 12, I suppose I began to play it.
Can you remember writing your first song?
Yeah, it was a multi-stanza'd, epic kind of song. It was about the Beatles, written in kind of a cryptic kind of story kind of style, I think. I don't remember what it sounded like or what the words were, but that was my first song, I think.
Can you remember what it was called?
No, I wish I did.
Did you find songwriting easy at that age?
Yeah, I think so. I had quite a few songs pretty quickly, including stuff that I think ended up on early Pixies records, Your
songwriting's always kind of, you've always kind of honed in on kind of various subjects and themes all throughout your writing career. Can you remember what your first obsessions were, the first kind of things? I mean, you mentioned the Beatles there, but what were the other kind of things that you were very preoccupied with early on?
Well, mostly early on, obsessions would have been a lack of them. You know what I mean? It's more focus on things like rhyme scheme and abstraction and coming up with something that sounded interesting. You know what I mean? That sounded haunting or creepy or scary or crazy or whatever. You know what I mean? You know, the notion that you have to have subject matter for a song is sort of a foreign kind of concept to me, because if you grow up listening to Donovan or listening to the Beatles, if you really, of course, we all know what I Want to Hold Your Hand is about, but everybody quickly outgrows I Want to Hold Your Hand. They move on to the heavier stuff. And as soon as you move on to the heavier stuff, the subject matter becomes indiscernible or difficult or abstract or obviously about the sound of the language, you know what I mean? And so this is my model. And so the whole notion that like, well, let's sing about something, what's it about, is not the first place that I go. I can go there now, especially because I'm a practiced songwriter, but that the idea that is what you're supposed to do is not my first choice or whatever. And I think that isn't the case for other people, because their starting place is a different place, and their starting place comes from a more narrative place, a place that has plot, a place that has meaning or significance. This is a song about this, especially I would say in the last 30 years or something. I think that the things like, political music or spiritual music, or the fact that people have this notion that, songwriters are some sort of beacon of positive energy and they've got to convey something really important either from their heart or from the annals of humanity. You know what I mean? There's all this, and I realize I'm kind of poking fun at it a little bit, but you know what I mean? It's just sort of like that to say that that's the way that it is. That's the way that's the ideal or whatever. It's just a made up rule. There are no rules, and if you listen to a child speak or a child sing, they're not concerned with these things. So, I think that there's a lot of primal things that are probably, if there are any rules, therein are the rules in the primal area, not in the intellectual area, cerebral area.
In 1986, you formed the Pixies with Kim Deal, David Lovering, and Joey Santiago. Can you remember the first rehearsal that you played together? Remember the first time you played with each other?
Well, with all four Pixies, because I was playing with Joey before we got the other two. It probably was. It was either at a rehearsal space in the Boston area that I had rented, or it may have been at David Lovering's family's home north of Boston in a garage. His father was a painter, and so they had sort of this space that was open for rehearsing. So I think we used to go to practice there when we were in between rehearsal spaces, kind of, because sometimes we were in a room, in a warehouse with lots of other bands, or sometimes we were out there in the suburbs.
Was it a good experience playing together quite early on? Did it feel like you were musically achieving what you wanted to achieve quite early on, or did it take a bit of work to kind of get there, to translate the songs into a band environment?
Well, when you have a band in most cities, I imagine, I don't know what it's like in every city, I suppose, but you beg and you plead to get a slot on a Monday night or a Tuesday night, and they encourage you to bring people, and usually they ask when people come to the door to hear a bunch of nobody bands, which nobody band are you here to see, and they try to get an assessment of how many drinkers you've pulled in, and then if things go well, not based on the aesthetics of your show, but probably more based on how many drinkers you brought into the room, will determine whether or not you get asked back and what night and at what time slot. So we started off on last band of nobodies on a Tuesday night, which meant there must have been some sort of aesthetic choice made by the booker. In other words, they put us on last. They thought we sounded lively, maybe based on our tape or whatever it was that we had given them.